Hello, everyone. So, in the past few weeks, we've been talking about the French Revolution, but now we are going to be getting into, uh, over the next couple of days, revolutions that occurred in Latin America and Haiti that were in part due to what was going on in France with the French Revolution, but were also inspired by the American Revolution as well. So, just in terms of looking at these several different revolutions that are going on in different countries that we know of today in Central and South America, as well as the Caribbean, this is really a period of significant political and social change that is going on in the late 18th century, so the late 1700s, and the early 19th century as well, so the early 1800s. And so this resulted in independence for a lot of different Latin American countries, as well as Haiti. And it is built off of these Enlightenment ideas that we've been talking about so much in terms of inspiring a lot of these revolutions, as well as the American and the French Revolution. And three people that we're going to be talking about today in regards to these many different revolutions: Simone Bolivar, José de San Martin, and then Toussaint Louverture. And so all three of these people have a huge role to play in these different revolutions. So the first one we're going to talk about here is the Haitian Revolution. And Haiti is a country that is in the Caribbean. It's in orange on the map that you can see on your screen right now. And it sort of splits the island of Hispaniola with the Dominican Republic. So if you've been to the Dominican Republic, you've been on the island where Haiti is. It's on the other side of that particular island. However, very different from the Dominican Republic in that it's a French-speaking country because of its French colonial roots. So Haiti was originally known as Saint-Domingue, and this was a French colony, like I said, and their main economy was based around both slave labor and the production of sugar. And because of that, Saint-Domingue became a very, very wealthy place for some people, mostly people who, again, were not enslaved, which was very few people on the island. So this was a very top-heavy in terms of social hierarchy. And in terms of that social hierarchy, just in terms of who had the power within these societies, Saint-Domingue was dominated by the white plantation owners at the top. And because this was, again, a French colony, they had a very French term for that, Grand Blancs. And these people, really dominated society. And then you had free people of color in the middle. And this included people who maybe had been enslaved but were no longer enslaved, or their families had always, been free, at least for a couple of generations. And then at the bottom, you have the enslaved Africans who, really made up most of the population of this particular island. Now, because of the enslavement that is going on, you have an extreme amount of inequality. And sugar plantation in particular was a very, very brutal system. Not only is it very backbreaking work, in order to produce sugar, because you have to cut the stalks very low to the ground. And so you're like bending over every day, and it's just a very labor intensive job. But of course, the slavery system was also extremely brutal. And so, the enslaved people are carrying a huge load on this island for the few that are in the middle and at the top. So in terms of causes, I mean, it's probably not a wonder then that Saint-Domingue by the 1790s was on the verge of revolution. And at the time, Saint-Domingue, again, was the most prosperous and valuable colony in the Caribbean, not only for the French, but in total. And because of what they're producing in terms of sugar, but also coffee and other cash crops, they've become extremely, extremely profitable for the French. But like I said, this is built on the backs of enslaved Africans who are forced to work on the island's plantations. And so what ends up happening is that in 1789, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, the French people in France themselves overthrow the government, and the French Revolution begins. And the ideas of the Enlightenment, including liberty, equality, human rights, these were spreading across the world as well. And so these ideas ended up inspiring the enslaved people of Saint-Domingue, who also considered themselves Frenchmen, and due to the Declaration of the Rights of Man, are being told that slavery is over, that they are free. And so they take that as a calling and as an inspiration to overthrow this brutal slave system that is going on. And so in 1791, August to be exact, a group of enslaved Africans gathered in the northern part of Saint-Domingue, the northern part of the island, and launched a massive uprising against the French colonial masters. And the rebels were led by a man named Toussaint Louverture. And because of Toussaint, and we'll talk about Mr. Louverture in just a second, they quickly gained control of the northern part of the colony. And so a full-on, and for the first time in history, a full-on slave revolt is going on in terms of overthrowing this system that is happening. And the revolution became a long and bloody struggle. The rebels ended up having to face off against not only the French, who are their colonizers, but then the Spanish and the British as well. And each country wanted to not only take over this particular colony because of the prosperity that was going on here, but also they wanted to put down a rebellion that threatened their own patterns of slavery that they were taking part in, the Spanish and the British, across the Western Hemisphere and in Africa. And so in order to protect this system, they wanted to face off against the Haitians. However, and luckily for all of us, and luckily for the Haitians, Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian rebellion was able to defeat them and the French and the British and the Spanish, and they secured the independence of Saint-Domingue in 1804, and they renamed it Haiti. And Toussaint Louverture is really a remarkable person in his own right. He has become known as the liberator of Haiti, and he was born into slavery in 1743 himself. However, as a young man, he was able to secure his freedom. He became a skilled military strategist, a skilled leader. He became a businessman in his own right, and really was, a very significant figure if we're talking about revolutions and freedom across the world. And so he led his troops with remarkable skill and with great tactical acumen. He was able to successfully defeat all three of those major powers, those major European powers that we talked about. And he was able to also match his military success with political savvy as well. And, the island of Saint-Domingue was a very complex place. There are, a lot of groups with a lot of different desires in terms of where they want to see Haiti go. And so he was really able to build a complex set of alliances and also navigate some rivalries that may have derailed the revolution. And he was able to really show off his strategic acumen both on the battlefield and in terms of politically. However, unfortunately for Toussaint Louverture, one of the French missions to retake control of the island, in 1802, he was captured by French forces. And so he was sent off to France and put into prison. And unfortunately, he caught a disease there and ended up dying a year later. And so he was not able to, be there when Haiti gained its liberation and its freedom. However, his legacy really lives on as a revolutionary hero and a champion of freedoms, and has really inspired a lot of people. Now, in terms of Napoleon, who we Now, in terms of just the importance of the Haitian Revolution, it was a remarkable achievement. It was the only successful slave rebellion in history that ended up leading to the establishment of an independent nation. And so there's a lot of pride that goes with that notion. Haiti was also the first independent black republic, and because of the reactions of different countries and because of that desire to defend themselves against the crookedness of what was going on at that time in terms of enslavement, by really trying to make an example out of Haiti, it's really impacted the future of that country. Even to this day, Haiti has, sort of gone through some very turbulent times and still continues to do so. And so in the aftermath of that revolution, the Western countries ended up refusing to acknowledge their independence. They also placed heavy economic sanctions on them, and this includes the United States and France. They had to pay back the property damage from having been enslaved and taking away that property from the Grand Blancs. And that economic hurt is still felt today, like I said. However, it still remains a powerful symbol of human spirit's ability to overcome even the most daunting obstacle. Now, the next revolutions we're going to talk about have to do with Central and South America. And there's a series of revolutions we're going to talk about here in the next few slides. So just like in Haiti, Latin America, knowing the social structure of Latin America is going to be important to understanding why these particular revolutions happened. So there was a very rigid social class structure, and this was often based on race and where you were born. So the highest class were the peninsulares, and these were Spanish-born white Europeans that were at the top of the hierarchy. Okay, so Spanish-born people who had migrated during their lifetime were considered these peninsulares. Then underneath them, you have Creoles, and these were American-born people of European descent, and these were second in the hierarchy. However, they were often as wealthy as the peninsulares, and resented the power that peninsulares had in that society. So even though they might have been wealthy, they did not have quite the power of those peninsulares. And then below them are mestizos. And, this is where race plays a factor. These were people of mixed European and indigenous ancestry. And these people had much less power in society. And then at the bottom were indigenous peoples who had, people who were Aztec, Mayan, Incan, other tribes that were part of these indigenous peoples that had come from North America, and enslaved Africans at the bottom. And what this did was that it created a social tension and a desire for change that would lead to revolution. So in terms of the causes, we're sort of breaking them down into three different types. And you can see on your chart there with economic, political, and social types. So in terms of economic causes of the revolutions, the colonial system was designed to benefit the mother countries. And so Latin American economies focused on the production of raw materials and agricultural goods for export. And this led to, the benefits of this not coming to the colonies themselves, but going to the European country that had taken over this land. And so this really led to a lot of economic stagnation. It also led to resentment among local populations who were doing the work and who were seeing all this wealth go from their lands to Europe. There was also growing economic power for Creole people, so locally born Spanish and Portuguese descendants, and these were becoming more and more wealthy individuals. And so they also contributed to their desire for general autonomy or independence and self-determination, so the ability to make their own laws to impact their own lands. But you also have political reasons as well, and a lot of it comes down to oppression. This was a highly centralized, highly authoritarian, or absolutist sort of government with little representation or political power granted to the local populations. And so this led to also a lot of resentment towards the foreign rule and the desire for self-governance. The Creole elites wanted the power that the peninsulares had, and they no longer they wanted a voice in this government and in terms of making this decision-making process. Also, during this time, we have the ideas of the Enlightenment again coming in, which are telling people to, if the government is not standing up for your rights, you can overthrow them. And you're also seeing, revolutions start to go on around the world. And so this creates even more tension when thinking about these things. Also, a lot of the Creoles were being educated over in Europe, and so they're seeing the spirit of this enlightenment go on, and they're seeing it for themselves, so that when they come home, they are talking about these ideas and wanting to see this put into place in their own country. The last group here are social tensions. So the social inequality that is going on because of the high rigid hierarchy that is going on, and also the discrimination that's going on, especially towards those that are considered part of this mestizos group, as well as enslaved Africans, as well as indigenous populations, is really fueling a lot of resentment, in addition to the Creoles, who again are driving this idea of revolution because, again, they want to take over these societies. So in the middle of all of this, we come back to Napoleon again, because even though these are Spanish colonies and you would not think that Napoleon is going to impact revolution here, he actually ends up doing that. So a couple weeks ago we talked about the Peninsular Wars, and those were wars that were taking place in Spain and Portugal. And in 1808, the French invasion of Spain and the replacement of the Spanish king by Napoleon's brother led to what is called a power vacuum. And this is where, power, the authority is now gone, and something has to fill its place in order for things to still continue to run. And so what ends up happening in those cases is that it gets filled by something. And in this case, it's going to be revolution. And so the Creole elites see that the Spanish king has been replaced by someone that they don't respect, that is not Spanish. And so they want independence in this time because the government is no longer seen as legitimate. And in these Enlightenment ideas, you can replace the ruler in those cases. And so Napoleon's brother being put in place is seen as, not legitimate enough to continue on with the status quo. And so the fuse of revolution is lit. And so given the weakness of Spain and the dislike of French rule by Spain's Latin American subjects, the talk of revolution was on the rise, and starting in 1810 in Mexico, revolution was starting. A Mexican Catholic priest named Father Miguel Hidalgo and another leader Jose Maria Morelos, ended up fighting for independence for Mexico between 1810 and 1821 from the Spanish. But in that same year of 1810, Venezuela began fighting for independence, and soon much of Latin America was inflamed by revolutionary movements, which by 1824 will push out Spain out of most of South America and Central America. So there's a couple leaders that we just want to talk about real fast. The first one is Simón Bolívar. And this is one of the first important leaders that we're going to talk about, and probably the most significant figure in these Latin American, revolutions. So he led movements for independence in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and he was born into this Creole elite class, a very wealthy family. He became educated in Europe. He was inspired by the Enlightenment ideas and the French and American revolutions. And so when he comes back to Venezuela, where he was from, he wanted to free Latin America from Spanish rule. And so he led military campaigns in northern South America, which started in his home country of Venezuela. And even though he was defeated early on, Bolivar ended up going to Haiti, where he was further inspired by the Haitian Revolution, and it really changed his mindset as well over enslavement that was going on in Latin America, causing him to, swear off any further enslavement of peoples within these areas. And so when he comes back, he has the support of the Haitians, and he is able to lead more successful military campaigns by doing things like going and crossing the Andes Mountains to surprise Spanish forces in Colombia. And this would lead to key victories like the Battle of Boyaca in 1819. But also this leads to the liberation of the countries that we know today of as Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, okay, and led to a union of those countries known as Gran Colombia. He also helped to liberate Peru. He helped to found the country of Bolivia, and Bolivia is named after Bolivar himself. And so he's really a central figure in a lot of these revolutions. Afterwards, though, is where things start to get a little bit murky for Bolivar. Because even though he's this revolutionary who believes in these Enlightenment forces, he's starting to see that there's a lot of instability still within South America. And he himself does not believe that South and Central America is yet ready for the republic to be able to self-determine. And so he starts to believe that Latin America needed a strong, centralized, and authoritative leadership to avoid chaos. And sadly, that's become part of the political instability that has gone on within Central and South America. It's indicative of a lot of the leaders who have taken over those countries at different times. And so the Bolivar ends up becoming a dictator in certain ways, very similar to what we were talking about with Napoleon. All right, the second leader here is José de San Martín, and San Martín led movements for independence in Argentina, in Chile, and Peru. And he was a military leader from Argentina who ended up playing a key role in the liberation of southern South America. And so he helped liberate his home country, Argentina. He also led a daring march across the Andes Mountains to help free Chile, and then set his sights on liberating Peru. And this was really seen as the stronghold of where power was located for the Spanish, especially given its history as part of the Inca Empire. And so he entered Lima, Peru, and declared independence in 1821, at which point he met with Bolivar and ended up giving over control that he had sort of fought for and liberated to Bolivar. Because he felt that Bolivar was stronger. And so he ended up retiring from public life after that meeting. He ends up moving off to an island somewhere where he sort of dies in obscurity. Not a lot of people are keeping track of him. He's not well known at the time of his death. So in terms of both de San Martin and Bolivar, these men were both crucial in freeing Latin America from Spanish rule. Bolivar focused on the northern parts, San Martin in the south. However, they were both able to force the Spanish out of South America and Central America for the most part. And so in 14 years, Spain goes from having a huge empire in the New World to a much smaller empire across the world. So in terms of the outcomes, this is where we go back to those political, social, and economic things. If we thought back to the political causes, what happens because of these Latin American revolutions is that politically you see the end of Spanish and Portuguese colonial rule in most of the Americas. Brazil, which was a Portuguese colony, ends up fighting off the Portuguese as well around this time. You also have the establishment of independent republics. You also have a shift from monarchical to republican forms of government. You have the creation of new national identities that are separate from Spain. And then you also have the continued influence of Creole elites who have now become the most powerful factions within these societies. And then socially, you see the abolition of slavery. You see a gradual dismantling of racially based social hierarchy systems where people are in that mestizo class or the indigenous class can gradually rise up a little bit more. However, some of these things still exist to this day. And then also the increased rights for indigenous populations and people of mixed ancestries, and changes to gender roles with some women gaining more rights as well. And then finally, in terms of economic changes, you have the end of colonial trade restrictions where these countries can make money on their own, the opening of trade with other nations, and then challenges in establishing stable economies were also an issue. So with all of these things being said, please let me know if you have any questions over any of these rivalries that were so significant to world history overall.